USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, January 29th, 2024. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11 and 13 at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, it was not disappointing unless you are a BU fan. A great pair of games. Number 2 Boston College sweeping then number 1 Boston University. And obviously today's poll is going to show a change there. In the 25th and 26th all-time meetings between number 1 and number 2 ranked teams. And of course, that only goes back to 1997 with the USCHO poll, but it doesn't happen all that often, maybe once every year or maybe a couple of years, and then you'll get a couple of games. But Jim, you were on the call there. You were there. Before we get into some details, what was it like at those two arenas?
Pretty insane. The crowds, we've seen some building crowds this year around the East in hockey, and Hockey East leading the way. They've had some really big packed buildings. I think every team in Hockey East has sold out at least one game at some point this season. Look at Maine; they're sold out for almost the entire season. But inside BC's Kelly Rink on Friday was off the charts. They probably conservatively had 5,000, maybe more students there. Our broadcast booth is just above one of the overflow student sections. And every time Boston College scored a goal, we were getting sprayed with beer like it was Cristal on New Year's Eve. Those fans were going nuts, and they were enjoying it. And then you go to BU on Saturday, and they gave out some sort of like light sticks or something that were, blinking, and you turn the lights out in that place, and they were going nuts. It just both fan bases should be proud for what they put forward. They certainly did the best to support their teams. But BC, hey, listen, on the ice, they were the better team this weekend, top to bottom. Even though it technically was 2 1-goal games, 4-1 on Friday night had 2 empty net goals. I still look at that one as more of a 2-1 game, and then a great 4-3 game where BU scored an extra attacker goal to make it 4-3 with about a minute and change left. It was fun, but BC, hey, a lot to be proud of if you're an Eagles fan.
Yeah, I followed it through Twitter and through you popped up. I was walking. We went to the American Hockey League game on Friday, Jimmy, and after we played AIC in the afternoon, and I'm walking by a bar, and the bar was. I looked in the window as we're going into the Mass Mutual Center, and the bar was packed, and the game was on the big screen. Everybody was intently watching, and then your face popped up, and then everybody turned away. So it looked to be a really great atmosphere. You see the students lined up for the games, running in to get into the building to get their seats. And then the hockey didn't disappoint. And like I said, I had to follow it through Twitter and through reading the stories. But the way the game shaped up, and 1 versus 2, and the rivalry of it all, you can't ask for anything more in college hockey. And college hockey is better than ever. We talked about it last week with College Hockey Inc. And this just shows, coast to coast in Canada on, I think it was Saturday night, right? TSN.
Friday night we were on the TSN linear, and then Saturday on TSN Plus.
Yeah, and to have it in Nesson, it was what a great weekend of hockey that would have been to be there. And obviously you lived it and you saw it, so you're the best person to talk about. But fabulous for college hockey.
So both teams known for having a lot of young stars, all the blue chippers. Maybe a bit of an edge over the weekend for BC over BU. Will Smith, a goal and 2 assists. Gabe Perreault, 2 goals. And Ryan Leonard, a goal and 2 assists versus Macklin Celebrini, who everybody in Canada certainly was watching for too. 1-0-1 on the weekend, a goal and no assist. And Lane Hudson with an assist, which brings up the question, does Boston College have the better young talent, and is Boston College a deeper team than BU?
And well, I'm going to kind of say neutral on that young talent. I think they both have unbelievably young talent. Maybe BC has some more of it. Um, I thought that Boston College did a great job neutralizing both Celebrini and Hudson. Whereas it's just impossible to neutralize that entire the kid line, the Smith, Perot, Leonard line. In terms of being a deeper team, the way that BC has played in the last month, I'm starting to believe they might be. Their third line has been really good of late. Another freshman, Will Vode, he's been out of the lineup. It suffered an injury a week ago Sunday, but when he gets back, he's pretty powerful on that third line. And that third line was starting to click right before he got injured. I do say there's, sometimes Derek, you can say it as a coach, like you put your lines on paper. Are they really 1 through 4? But BU's fourth line, with Shane LaChance, who's 6'5", and Sam Stevens, who has great hands. That feels like maybe one of the better fourth lines in Hockey East, if that really is a fourth line. I kind of feel like that's more of a third line for BU, and just little head games that coaches play by lining their putting their lines on paper differently. But I do feel right now, and we're going to see this matchup again a week from today in the Beanpot semifinal. But right now, I feel like BC looks like the deeper team.
Yeah, the coaches do some really different things. I mean, you'll see the line chart pop up, and a lot of it's superstition, but you'll see the same lines. Game one, you play some coaches, and game one they lose. They'll have the same lines the next night, but just in different order. I know there's coaches that don't change their goalies. They just stay in numerical order all year, 1, 30, and 35, and it's straight down, and you never guess. So I think that to see where things are, like we've got a freshman line that's been first. We just haven't made any lineup changes, so it just stays there. And we've got all of our lines are the same. So I could put anybody in that spot. And I think everybody reads too much into line charts at times. And you said it perfectly. A third line isn't necessarily, if it's listed number 1, it could still be a third line. Coaches just get superstitious sometimes.
Well, the other big matchup was out west, and it had number 5 North Dakota hosting number 4 Denver. North Dakota got the sweep. And I think we'd have to agree, probably as strong a team out there as anybody. We've talked a lot about what Brad Berry had to do with 4 transfer defensemen and 4 freshman defensemen and get that together. They're number 2 in the Pairwise. We expect, as the votes are coming in, that they're going to be number 2 in the poll today, too. What do we know now about North Dakota, and then we can get to Denver. But North Dakota was terrific.
Yeah, I mean, to have that kind of weekend, but that was I think we said it last week, they're probably the most underrated team that was in the top 5. And we talked about it in depth. And we talked about the job that they've done with a new goalie from Miami and all new defensemen and Brad Schlossman's tweet of not losing 17, 18 games in a row. Those
in
are
regulation.
In regulation. That's pretty impressive. And now it's time. I think they're finally getting their due. And like you said, if they're number 2 now in the polls, really the Pairwise is what's the telling thing. The polls is just a popularity contest, and they're finally getting they're finally the cool kid now at number 2.
I continue to be impressed by this North Dakota team. They every time that they're put on a big stage, it seems of late they're coming through, and it's ironic because we talk about haven't lost in regulation. They had those 3 overtime losses in a row, and I think at that point we were starting to question, right? I mean, we were worried about them right around the break, but as good coaches and good teams usually do, they've proved us wrong, and there's not a reason to question them. I think everybody this weekend, when I was around BC and BU, being number 1 and number 2, they're like, "Hey, is there anybody as good as this team out there?" And I said, "Yeah, North Dakota. Watch out for them. A little bit older team, so you have some more experience on it, and they're quietly, which is crazy to me. How is North Dakota quietly playing this well? No, North Dakota didn't do anything quietly for 3 decades. And now, they had a couple of down years, and suddenly they're quietly finding ways to be one of the most dominant teams in the country.
And with them, it's like you just mentioned, it's not the young stars. We talked about the young stars. This is an old team. This is a team that's got grad transfers and from different places, and 21-year-old freshmen or 20-year-old freshmen. This is an old team. So this is not a young guns team, but they're just finding ways to continue to keep the train rolling. And like you said, we're talking about North Dakota being quiet as the number 2 team in the nation. I think the Sioux fans will probably have a lot to say. I'm sorry, Red Hawk. No, wait, what are they again now?
Fighting Hawks.
Fighting Hawks.
Well, I was going to say Green Hawks too, but the Fighting Hawks, actually, I like it better. It's just easier to say the Sioux fans. The Sioux fans are probably up in arms that are not getting the recognition they deserve. This is a legitimate Frozen Four type team.
Meanwhile, Denver, they came into the weekend 7-0-1 in their last 8, a couple of losses in a row. Probably if you're going to take 2 losses in a row, this is the time to take them and not at the end of February into March. But should we be concerned about Denver, or did they just take on a really good team at home?
I'm not concerned. This is still a very potent offense. Maybe they've got to find ways to tighten things up on the back end, because you look at some of their goals against numbers, and they've had a few games where 4 is kind of the norm, which that's getting a little high. But they have an offense that can counter that sometimes. You don't want to be winning games 6-4, but if you're a coach, you want to be winning games. So you take it however you get it. I'm not that concerned about Denver at all.
Yeah, it's the old saying, you'd rather win ugly than lose pretty, and they've been winning. I mean, their schedule hasn't been easy either. You got St. Cloud, who is 14, Omaha, who is 19, North Dakota, who's 5. Now they got Western Michigan coming in, who's got to be a little bit upset after getting swept both in overtime by Colorado College. But I wouldn't be concerned about Denver at all. They're going to be there, and then they got to go to Duluth, and they got Miami, and then back to St. Cloud. But yeah, this is too good of a team to get worried about them right now.
What is it about Colorado College finding ways to win in overtime?
2-1 both games, same score.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
pretty impressive. And it was one of those games that I did not, with my schedule, I didn't get to write the USCHO Edge column last Friday. But we talked about some of these matchups on our show, and I was looking for some big numbers, and the biggest number out there that I could find was Colorado College. I think they were like a plus 285 or something like that on Friday night. And I'm saying, why do the betting sites keep doing this? Colorado College shows that they can win on the road on Friday nights. Well, hey, they can win on the roads on Saturday night too, and overtime is no problem for them. They're suddenly one of those teams that, hey, we'll find ways to keep in the game, and then we'll pot a goal here and there.
Yeah, they're 5-1-1 in overtime.
Yeah, and quality wins. You got Western, you got Minnesota. They split with. I mean, they're beating some good teams.
Yeah.
Number 15, St. Cloud. They had a loss and a tie versus Omaha. We had been talking about them flying under the radar, and they had been unbeaten like a month ago, unbeaten in NCHC play. 0-3-3 since, I guess, with Sports Illustrated going under, that USCHO takes over the Jinx. But they're 4 points in back of North Dakota in the battle for first place in the NCHC.
Yeah, you talk about, do you worry about Denver? And I said, no. Do I worry about St. Cloud? And I'd say yes. They finally get their offense going in pot 6 on Friday night, but they give up 7. They've struggled in these 6 games. You've got 1 goal scored, 6 on Friday and a loss, 3 goals scored against a very good North Dakota team in a tie, 3 goals scored and a loss, 4 goals at Denver, 1 goal at Denver. They end up with 3 ties in there. This was a rough part of their schedule, but I think giving up 7 to North Dakota on Friday kind of was the red flag for me. Okay, this team, they need to bounce back here, and didn't bounce back on Saturday. Yes, it's a tie, a 1-1 tie, but their offense suddenly sputters, and I don't know. When you also look at the fact that their non-conference schedule was a bit of a struggle this year, a loss to St. Thomas, getting swept by Minnesota State, a loss against Alaska, a loss to Michigan. That's why, despite the fact that we had a St. Cloud team that was undefeated 4 weeks ago in the NCHC, but they were down around like 10 and 11 in the pairwise, and now they keep falling. So that's a bit of a concern. If that was one of the teams you saw as a lock for the NCAA tournament in the NCHC, not as much of a lock anymore.
Wow, you just took what I was saying. I mean, I guess we couldn't count last week, and we put 17 teams in the tournament in our buy and sell.
Speak for yourself. I believe I had 16.
Yeah, thanks to Steve Metcalf for checking our math, by the way. But I'm concerned about them dropping to 13. I think 13 is going to be the number this year of getting in the tournament. You're going to have to be 13 or up, and that could spell doom. I was talking to one coach, and they do look. The coaches that are in that mix do look at it, and they said that we're closer to falling out of the tournament than we are climbing into the top 10. And because they look at the points, and their wins aren't going to give them massive jumps, but their losses are going to give them massive decreases in pairwise points. So I'd be concerned, because at 13 right now, you're right. I think they're right in the bubble.
And we're going to get into a little bit of the bubble in our second segment. Two more series to look at here before the break. Number 3, Wisconsin, a split against number 14, Michigan, losing 5-1 on Friday, winning in overtime 6-5 on Saturday after being behind throughout the whole game. I don't think the Badgers should be concerned. They have been playing, to use a number that Jim, or a phrase Jim might say, they've been playing with house money a little bit this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess I'm actually more concerned about Michigan and what happens on Saturdays for Michigan. That's 2 Saturdays in a row. They basically had this game, a couple of times. I believe they were up by 2 goals at one point. Last week, it was a 3-goal lead, maybe it was a 4-goal lead against Michigan State on the second game, and they lost that one. Just holding leads for Michigan kind of concerns me a little bit. I mean, they've obviously been lights out on back-to-back Friday nights against very good teams, Michigan State and now Wisconsin. But that, I'll tell you, for Wisconsin, that one probably feels like a bit of a character win. To come back, find a way to make sure you don't get shut out on the weekend. You take 2 out of the 6 Big Ten points, and I don't want to say you keep rolling. I mean, that they fell a tiny bit in the pairwise. Maybe I think they might have gone up 1 spot after that win on Saturday, and they've passed Maine, so they're now 4 in the pairwise. But I'm with you, Ed. No concerns about Wisconsin.
And those are big. We talk about splits. You want to sweep at home and split on the road, or at least get 4 of 6 at home and 3 on the road. And those are 2 big points, because they're 5 back of Michigan State with 2 games in hand. And now they're 6 ahead of Minnesota with 2 games in hand. They've got games in hand on everybody except Michigan. And to be able to put that together, and they're right on Michigan State's tail a little bit. And I really think that you might look back and go, those might be the points that can help them if they end up winning the Big Ten championship. Those might be the 2 biggest points they may have got. And that's weird to say, because when you get 30 plus points, they're all big points. But if you lose those, how far behind are you then? Those are 2 massive points.
Yeah, especially since Michigan State had a split. Number 8 Michigan State hosting number 9 Minnesota. A 3-2 win by Michigan State on Friday after being down 2-0, scoring 3 goals in the third period. Minnesota coming back to win 5-1 on Saturday. Minnesota comes away with 3 points out of the weekend. Could possibly, if things hadn't fallen apart in the third period on Friday, could have been an even bigger weekend. But that split keeps things pretty tight in the Big Ten, especially with Wisconsin in those games in hand Derek mentioned.
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting there. I think it was Eric Bigo, who's a great writer out of the Twin Cities, put it very plainly and bluntly on Twitter the other night, is saying basically it was 5 great periods for Minnesota on the weekend. They only come away with 3 points, which that's the disappointment. You laid one egg for 20 minutes. And because of that, you split a series instead of taking 4 points, instead of taking 5 points, instead of taking the most desirable, which would have been 6 points. So, I guess that's good teams. Michigan State makes you pay. You make some mistakes, and next thing you know, you're paying for them. But Minnesota, almost a perfect weekend.
Yeah, that was a weekend where, if you look at it, that could have been disastrous once again for Minnesota. But that shows you a lot about their character to be able to, rebound from that horrible period, to give up that lead with basically 5 minutes left in the game. You've got a 2-1 lead. You've got a 2-0 lead going in the third. You have a 2-1 lead. They score with 4:58 left, and then with 4 seconds left to win the hockey game, and you're 4 seconds away from at least getting a point. And but to rebound and win 5-1 on the road against a tough Michigan State team that is leading the league, you talk about key points. Those 3 points that basically Michigan State came back and stole in playing one period that weekend, and that game to score that. So you look at the Big Ten, and no lead looks safe, no game looks safe, and they're going to be jockeying back and forth. And you're looking at Wisconsin, Michigan State right now as the two juggernauts. You talk about where we are in college hockey. The so-called blue bloods are all back, and they're all at high end right now. Wisconsin, Michigan State, Minnesota, Boston College, Boston University, Maine. Those are some big time teams that are kind of making some recoveries.
As you say that, Derek, I was writing the show notes as I was watching Detroit with a massive lead over San Francisco in the football game on Sunday, and it was making me think, oh, maybe I'll pose a question: who's going to be the next team to reach their first national championship game, thinking that Detroit was going to reach their first Super Bowl? Well, I looked at the list and I said that there's nobody on this list that really has a chance to, get into the tournament this year that hasn't been in a national championship game. So it really has turned into a lot of blue bloods. I think I'd have to go all the way down to maybe, assuming that Arizona State and Alaska can't get in, Penn State at 22 might be the top team from an actual conference right now. That
St. Cloud, Western Michigan.
St. Cloud played in a national championship game.
Oh, I thought you meant won a national championship.
Oh, yeah, played in the national. Western
has not.
That was the other one. So we all would have been picking Western, and I said that was a stupid question to ask.
Well, it just shows you take the points, kick the field goal.
Yeah. Yep. Never take points off the board. We learned that a couple of weeks before that too.
Armchair quarterback, and the poor Detroit coach is going to be armchair quarterback till next September.
You know what, though? I'll tell you this, and I'll use a college hockey reference. He stayed true to what he was doing, whether you disagree with it or not. That's what he did all year. And we go back to when Quinnipiac played Michigan way back in the NCAA tournament, I think 2 or 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah, when Rand pulled his goalie. That's what he does. And that's the time he does it. And it worked in the ECAC championship game for Quinnipiac. It didn't work in that Michigan game. And then they had a couple other goals, and everybody questioned that. And the next year they come back and win a title. So maybe that's an omen, college hockey omen that Detroit Lions fans can take moving forward. But he stayed true to his word, just like and his personality, just like Quinnipiac did.
Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll look at teams on the Pairwise bubble. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozenpool. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review, looking at the Pairwise bubble. And as we go through these teams, looking at number 12 through number 18, one thing I'd like us to keep in mind is the teams that have the best chance of moving up. We talked in the first segment about how it's a lot easier to drop than it is to go up, but there are also some leagues, or in the case of Arizona State, non-conference situations where it's a lot tougher to go up with wins. So let's take a look. Michigan, after their weekend, is sitting at number 12 in the Pairwise and an RPI of 0.5592. They can't breathe too easy at this point. And in fact, it's really only about the top 7 right now who are still sitting pretty, which is pretty late in the season for that to happen. But Michigan, what about them?
They don't have a lot of room for error, but they're in a conference where, a split every weekend probably will be okay as long as they can, not get knocked out right away in their conference tournament. They're in a better position than any other team that we're going to mention just because they're already ahead. But small fractional margins between teams, and the next two we're going to get to really highlights that. But the RPI right now of the teams between number 12 and number 16 are fractional. That's how close everything is.
Yeah, I'm still, if this was a buy or sell, I'm still not sold on Michigan right now, and that's weird to say, but they've given up a couple big numbers in games lately. Michigan State 7 goals, Wisconsin 6. They gave up and they scored 12, but they gave up 4 to Stonehill, 6 to Notre Dame. They've been giving up some goals, and I don't think they've got the potent offense that they've had in the past. So they're going to have to tighten things up so they don't have a big weekend where they give up big numbers in both games.
The next two are St. Cloud and Western Michigan, and I think we can kind of talk about them in the same set of thoughts. St. Cloud has a slightly lower RPI than Western Michigan, 5540 to 5568. They're going to be battling in the NCHC, which gives them some opportunity to improve, but this is a tenuous position right now for both of them.
And what's really interesting is St. Cloud being ahead despite having the lower RPI. It goes right back to November 10th and 11th when St. Cloud had 2 road wins at Western Michigan. These two teams will play each other at least 2 more times, February 23rd and 24th. If you're just looking at the jockeying for position, because these teams are 13 and 14, and we're kind of predicting the bubble's going to be right around 13, 14, that one weekend becomes a really big weekend. If Western can find a way to sweep that, even the season series, you take the head-to-head component out at least, and then you're really looking at the RPI. And right now, Western's the team with the highest RPI. So in terms of, you don't have to usually look at one series when you're thinking about the Pairwise this time of year, but this is one of those cases where you have St. Cloud and Western in the same conference. They play 4 times. They might play 5 times, 6, 7 times technically, I guess, in if they were to match up in the first round of the tournament. But that's one of those head-to-head matchups that it really will make a difference who comes ahead with the head-to-head between those two clubs.
I would be circling February 20, that 23rd, 24th weekend of St. Cloud State, Western at St. Cloud State. But then they've got North Dakota right after that. So it's a couple big weekends here going through things. So hold on, I get interrupted by St. Cloud State great Ryan Malone walking through here. I'm on a podcast. Yeah, we're walking through US College Hockey Online right here. And great. I don't even know if we'll cut this out, but still.
It's weird to have him walk through at the same time.
Yeah, we had Dave Hansen before that. Now Ryan Malone. I'm talking about St. Cloud State. So yeah, you got Western playing St. Cloud. That's going to be a big weekend for as far as the Pairwise go, and go from there. I mean, that should be. You said it right, Jimmy. There's some components that are going to be in and out, and go from there.
Next on the list is Cornell, and boy, is this a tough one. I think about the Big Red. It's a weak year for the ECAC, so moving up in the RPI is going to be difficult. And even if they get up in there and they don't win in their conference tournament, a loss there could plummet them a couple of positions. That's a really, really tough position, I think.
They have to find a way to take care of business over the next 10 games. Even if Saturday night, after a good road win against Harvard, who's been playing better of late, they go to Dartmouth and they end up with a tie. You really wanted that extra point, extra pairwise points. Now you've got St. Lawrence Clarkson at home. You end up with, it's home, away, home. That's their next 5 weekends. And in that, you're playing St. Lawrence, Clarkson, RPI, and Union all twice. Brown Yale is the other two teams they'll play once. They don't have any room for error. My guess would be to put them in any comfort. They're probably going to have to go 9-1, 8-2, maybe 8-1-1. But I don't feel like they can't come out of this. We were talking about Michigan, where I was saying if they could, play 500 hockey in their league, they'd be fine in the pairwise. Not the case for Cornell. They have to go almost perfect. I think an 850 winning percentage the rest of the way is probably needed.
Yeah, you beat me there right to it. And I was looking at their schedule. There's not a lot of wiggle room, especially with those teams that are below them. But hats off, though. I mean, we talked about the ECAC quietly going under the radar this year. The Union, they're climbing up in the standings pretty high, and they're battling for a first-round bye. So some of those games are going to be really challenging for the Big Red, even though they're not high in the pairwise. They're battling for something big within the standings. Colgate with new coach right there on their heels to it. They're both at right 4 and 5. So these games aren't going to be easy. And you say there's no wiggle room for error. There's a lot. I think most everybody we're talking about right now, there's not a lot of room for error that we're going to be going from here down.
Let's go to New Hampshire, fresh off a weekend split up at Vermont. And I'm looking at their schedule ahead. UNH sitting at 16 in the pairwise. They've got BU at home on Friday. They still have BC 3 times on the schedule. They have Maine twice in sold out home games. This is a tall order for the Wildcats.
It is. And we've talked all year about what a nice resurgence this has been for UNH and Michael Souza. And that's, so critical to get that program back into the national picture. But they haven't had what we technically would consider a quality win since the beginning of the season. They started the year with a win over BU, then split a series with Quinnipiac. So those were, some real quality wins right there. But everything since then, Dartmouth, Northeastern 3 times, RIT probably can be considered a decent quality win because it was on the road and it is a top 20 pairwise team. But Sacred Heart 2 against Princeton, UConn, and the split with Vermont on the road this week, hurt them a little bit. That keeps plummeting their RPI and pairwise position. So this Friday against BU at home probably becomes one of the big games, as does that trio of games against Boston College. They can probably go 500 in those games and pick up some RPI points. If you get a win against 2 wins between 4 games against BC and BU, Maine's another team that you could pick off that's their big rival at home. Those will be sold out at Wintermore Center. So I feel like there's still plenty of room to move up for UNH, but there's not a lot of room for error. You can't lose the games that you're supposed to win. You can't lose them to UMass Lowell. You probably can't lose anything to Merrimack or UMass for that matter. And then you've got to find a way to pick up some points against BC, BU, and Maine.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think they can afford to lose any of the 4 games against Merrimack or Lowell. But you've also got UMass in there. You talked more about the BU, BC, but UMass is sneaky right in the mix there too. So I think those could be some quality wins if they can find a way. But still, once again, not a lot of room for error against teams that are below them. It's the team, and then they've got to steal some from the teams above them.
We've talked week after week about Arizona State and what they need to do. The prognosticators who crunch all the numbers say if they win out, it's about a 48% chance of getting in. They've got to do all of this on the RPI, and the portion of the RPI they've got to do it in is winning percentage, because they're not going to be helped much by the strength of schedule of the teams they're playing. A tall order the last year as an independent. Stranger things have happened. As long as there's a chance they can do it, basically 50-50. What do you think?
So you're saying there's a chance?
Yes.
Oh, it's a tough one, because I don't even think, like you talk about no room for error, I don't even think you can go to overtime and win some of these games.
No.
Because, I mean, you lose any portion of any of these games, Lindenwood, both Alaskas, LIU, Anchorage. I mean, both games, you got Alaska at home and then Alaska away, and then you're got to go back to Alaska to play Anchorage the last weekend of the year. I don't see it. They're basically planning to try to get to their most wins in program history. But I think if they even just go to overtime with one of these teams and win, they still might not get in.
Yeah. If you have 10 games left, that would be, if you're perfect, that's 27 wins. But then, at this point, you go back and look at wins. How many overtime wins do they have? They had a win over Merrimack in overtime. They had a win over Stonehill in overtime. They had a win over Denver in overtime, win over Providence in overtime. So when you look at that current 17, I forgot Nebraska Omaha, which was overtime as well. So when you look at the 17 wins that they have, only 12 of them have come in regulation. They'd need another 10 regulation wins, I think, to probably give themselves a chance. And you nailed that, Derek. That I don't think you can afford even overtime wins right now. They've got to get things done. And listen, they've got the team to go in and keep the pedal on the metal, sweep Lindenwood, get the 4 against Alaska. Those are probably the 4 toughest. Then 2 against LIU and 2 against Anchorage on the road. Those are, a little bit more difficult. But at that point, their RPI still is probably somewhere around 14, 15. Their winning percentage would be pretty high, and that gives a little bit of a boost to the RPI. But it's getting late early right now.
Well, you also brought up Alaska. This is a team, they've got to go to Alaska twice.
Right.
They got to go to Fairbanks and to Anchorage. This is a team that's not used to traveling a lot this year. So remember, They haven't played a lot of road games, and not easy places to play either.
Last one on the list is Colorado College. You talk about overtime wins. 5 of the wins for the Tigers have been in overtime, and that certainly has depressed the RPI number. They're at number 18 again. A big hill to climb, but in the NCHC, maybe some opportunities there because of the strength of schedule for that conference.
That is where it lies, is the fact that they now have to really become the great home team, because they have 2 against St. Cloud State, 2 against North Dakota over the next 3 weeks at home. And then they only have to go to the road 3 more times, twice to Omaha, and then their last game of the season. That's a home and home with Denver. They'll be on the road the last night of the regular season. They could put themselves in position where then doing something within the NCHC tournament, reaching the Final Four of that conference. That's going to be the most important, I think, part of what they're going to be able to do if they can put themselves in position. Say they, have a way to finish this regular season off 7-3, even if there's an overtime 1 or 2 in there, then they find a way to sweep a first round series in the NCHC. I think that could get them somewhere up around 12-13.
I mean, I think this might, we've been talking about there's not much room for error. This might be the team that has probably the most room for error because of their schedule. But like you said, they got to win their games at home, and then they got to go take some on the road. So I think it's one of those things where this might be the team that could be the sneaky one laying around. I'm not as good as numbers with the numbers as you guys are. And, playoffstatus.com for me has been down. So I haven't been able to get on that for a couple. I don't know why, but that might be the sneaky team if I'm just going off of feel. and the eye test right now that could climb the most because of their schedule and because of how they're playing.
So, Jim, they're not going to put a betting line on these 7 teams we just talked about, number 12 through number 18, but I'm absorbing some stuff about wagering from you on our other podcast. How about an over-under of 2.5 on how many teams out of that bubble make it in?
I would take the over on that. I would. I think the cut, I know Derek keeps saying the cut will be 13. I think it'll probably be 14. The only question mark I really have is Quinnipiac. Will they win their conference tournament? I see one of the top 5-6 Hockey East teams getting in. I see 4 teams from the NCHC. I see 3 or 4 from the Big Ten. So I'm not that concerned about who wins those tournaments because the odds would favor the fact that it would be a team that's already in the field. And obviously CCHA and Atlantic, we know where they stand. So I would go over. I think that 3 of those teams that we just discussed, so that's 3 out of 7, probably get in the field.
But you just said 14 is you think it's going to be 14.
So 12, 13, 14 could be it. It could be 12, 13, and 18 from that list, whatever. I think 3 of those teams will get in.
Here's the monkey wrench. And Derek mentioned Union. We haven't talked much about Union. We've talked about, what happens with Quinnipiac and Cornell, and maybe Cornell beats Quinnipiac. But if things all aligned right, you could have Quinnipiac, Cornell, and then somebody else from ECAC. And what has looked like a 1-team bid all season could end up being 3. Not likely, but it could pull together.
Not likely, but it's still possible. We had it last year. ECAC was supposed to get 3 in, and then Colgate runs the table in the tournament, and they end up getting 4. And that really threw the numbers off for a lot of leagues. Hockey East being the team that was cannibalized the most because of that. But it's possible. But again, not likely. 2 years in a row, I'm not sure I see that.
Is it possible that Quinnipiac losing in the ECAC tournament last year paved a better way for them to win the national championship?
200%. I've always thought that loss probably galvanized that team a little bit and made them feel like the NCAA tournament was much more important.
But I also mean it took somebody else out who could have been a contender against them.
That's a good point.
I'm also going to throw another monkey wrench. I threw Union. I brought up Colgate. We haven't talked about Clarkson at all. They're in second place in that league, and we keep talking about Cornell. I don't think that we're talking about them as far as a pairwise rating.
No.
But they're still playing some pretty good hockey within that league. They got a .639 winning percentage within league. So let's not just sit here and there's some other ones that are sneaking into the picture a little bit. We've talked about Quinnipiac being the dominant, but if one of those teams can knock somebody off in a 1 game in knock Quinnipiac off in a 1 game in Lake Superior or in Lake Placid, I think then we're going to be sitting here going 13, and you're going to go, Derek's right.
That absolutely changes. I mean, that's why I started this whole thing by saying it all depends on Quinnipiac.
So it sounds like my over-under of 2.5 teams is probably pretty good for the house.
It's a good number.
All right. Well, why don't we break there and wrap up this edition? This podcast has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your seats. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.